around the country, we see evidence that voting discrimination, voter suppression is alive and well, and it's important that we know that. What are some things to keep an eye out for in your community? When you hear election officials say that we're making some 11th hour changes because we need to protect the integrity of the process. We're making an 11th hour change because we're concerned about vote fraud. We're making an 11th hour change because we want to save money. We're going to reduce the polling sites. We're going to collapse 5 into 2, as Congressman Clyburn referenced earlier. We should all sit up straight and sound alarms and bells and reach out to civil rights organizations like the Lawyers Committee and the NAACP and the Brennan Center, because that means that trouble's afoot. We have 50 days to go, and this often is the moment where we see some of the worst efforts to turn the clock back and make voting more difficult. In 2014, 36% of Americans turned out to vote. 36% of eligible Americans turned out to vote. That was the lowest rate that we've seen in more than 70 years. And I think it is a reflection of the fact that some of these suppression efforts are working. And so we have to fight back to turn the tide to make sure that everyone who is eligible to participate is able to do so this election cycle. I want to take a moment to congratulate Senator Pugh in Maryland for your work and your leadership. Restoring the right to vote for 40,000 American citizens in your state. There's a lot of bad stuff, but your story is a success story this election cycle that needs to be replicated around the country. When we look in Virginia, we see another success story. The governor there took action to restore the right to vote for 200,000 people who are disenfranchised because of a felony conviction in their past. There was a battle in court. The court reversed his action, and so what he did was that night he said, you know what, I'll start signing these restoration orders one by one. He tried to do it in one fell swoop for 200,000. He started going through them one by one, and they hit him with a contempt order. And just yesterday, the court said, no, we're not finding in contempt. He's acting in the scope of his power and authority, doing what he's doing, and he's committed to restoring the right to vote for all 200,000 people in Virginia. So another success story there. It is a travesty that in 2016 we have 6 million citizens who can't exercise the most important right to vote, the most important right in our democracy because of something in their past, because of a mistake in their past. If you're in church this Sunday, then you, like me, believe in the power of redemption. And I do not believe that we should condemn people for the mistakes that they have made in the past. And if we want to give returning citizens a chance to rebound and really get back on their feet, then we have to work to tear down the barriers that they face, barriers to jobs and housing, but most importantly, barriers to the ballot box. So this is an incredibly important issue. I want to close out by taking just a moment to talk about criminal justice issues. I think that for Black people, right now, the crisis that we face when it comes to the need for policing reform, the need to repair our criminal justice system, there is nothing more pressing. We heard about a 13-year-old boy shot and killed in Ohio. Eric Garner, his family still waits for justice. Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, Alton Sterling, the list goes on and on. We are in dire need of reform. And I want to posit to you today that the right to vote can be transformative here, that the right to vote can be a radical tool used to help achieve long overdue criminal justice reform. District attorneys across our country are elected officials that need to be held accountable on Election Day when they fail to prosecute the officers who take the lives of innocent Black men and boys. Sheriffs all across our country are elected officials who run and operate the jails in our communities. Mayors are the ones who install police chiefs. So as we go back, I want us to change the way that we talk about the right to vote. There's so much focus on the top of the ballot, But the reality is that all of these positions that go all the way down the ballot have a tremendous impact on our day-to-day lives. So what can you do? Nicole mentioned briefly the Election Protection Program. This is a signature program that we lead at the Lawyers Committee. It includes a partnership with dozens of organizations around the country. We offer a toll-free hotline, 866 Our Vote. I encourage you to disseminate that number broadly and widely in your communities, 866 Our Vote. That is a number that you can call on Election Day or in the weeks leading up to Election Day to report the 11th hour mischief that may unfold in your communities, to report the problems that people experience at the polls, to report the fact that a poll site may have opened late or run out of ballots or the long lines. This is a line that you can turn to for help. We work with election officials to resolve the problems. We will go in and file emergency day litigation if we need to, but we need your help. We need more boots on the ground across the country this election cycle to fight back against a lot of the voter intimidation and harassment that we know is afoot. Two colleagues in the room, Kim Tigner and Nikki Thompson, if you can raise your hands. If you'd like to sign up to be a part of the election protection effort, come and see us. But we all have a role to play in this room. We all have a role to play in safeguarding access to democracy. So I encourage you to take the message back here to your home communities and do all you can to be vigilant, but most importantly, to encourage people to speak up and participate this election cycle. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. And Kristen brought up a very important point that, again, I want to tie back to the Voting Rights Act. We've been hearing about Shelby County all morning, but it's important to hear about Shelby County. One of the things we lost on that June 25th, 2013 decision day when Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was changed as we know it is something called the notice provision. That was a provision that declared that when a jurisdiction that was previously covered by the Voting Rights Act made any kind of change to their voting laws, they had to notify the public about those changes before they could be put into place. When we lost Section 5 as we knew it, we lost that notice provision. So when Kristen said we all have a job, that's one of the things that is one of the most important jobs we all have. We have to keep our eyes and ears open, and all of us become individual voting rights advocates. You have to, you know how they say, if you see it, say something. If you see something, say something. That applies when it comes to voting and changes to voting laws and things that are happening in our jurisdictions across the country. So I urge you, as we are creating a list, because that's what we're doing here, we are creating a list of to-dos and takeaways and the things that we need to do back in our home jurisdictions. That is one of them. You are individual advocates, and it is your job to provide notice about any kinds of changes you see in your jurisdictions. So with that, I'm going to turn to Dr. Tyson King Meadows, who is the academic in the room with us on this panel. Dr. Tyson King Meadows, tell us, how do we make sense of all this, given the work that you've done from an academic perspective? I know you have a panoply of tools at your disposal that you look at. You look at polling data, you look at other kinds of research. Help us to put into perspective what we are to make of the various challenges that we've seen to voting rights and what it all means and portends for the election coming up in November.
Okay. Well, what it means is math works. So I'm going to explain some math to you. In 2010, Democrats held 55% of the legislative at the state level. They controlled 27 general assemblies and 26 gubernatorials or governor's mansions. In 2016, they went down to 43% of the seats. They held 12 assemblies and 18 governor's mansions. Well, what does that math mean? Well, that math means that the math can shape the rhetoric. And so when Reverend Barber was talking about test cases, right, you have people in a room that decide they're going to float judicial balloons. Let's test this theory about what retrogression means. Let's test this theory about how we can change voting precincts. And so these test cases are actually designed not only for the moment, but for the future. Because if you can get precedent down, then you can refer back to that precedent and everything builds, okay? So these are test strategies. And everyone who saw Shelby coming knew that Northwest Austin was the test case to get rid of Section 5. Everyone saw it coming, okay? And everyone saw after the Georgia v. Ashcroft decision, and Congress fixed it when they reauthorized the 2006, in 2006 when they reauthorized the Voting Rights Act, they knew that there was going to be another test case, another balloon. Another balloon was going to be floated. So pay attention to the math. And third, as Senator Pugh will tell you, the math helps to shape the actual power that black mayors have, that the power that black state legislators have. Because I can put them on a particular committee where they're like giving out water, or I can put them on the finance committee. I can put them on the budget committee that determines the share of the budget that Baltimore City gets, or I could put them on the water committee. So those things matter. If there's not a mayor, then the mayor can appoint the right police chief. So you talked about getting young people involved. When I was young, my parents and my teachers always said, show me your work. Show the young people the math. Walk them through it. The top of the ticket does matter. The top of the ticket does matter because that individual is going to appoint Supreme Court justices. And then after the top of the ticket, you have the senators who are going to confirm or reject, if they get a hearing, those Supreme Court nominees. But if you want to get the police chief to get people on the ground, then that means you have to have a mayor. And all mayors are not the same, and I'm not talking about their ideology. There's some mayors who exist in strong council systems where the mayor is literally a figurehead. But then there are other states where the mayor has to deal with the city council. So that means the mayor and the city council have to go down to the General Assembly and basically beg for money. All right? That money helps hire the police chief. That money helps hire the fire chief. Break it down for the young people so that they understand. You want young people to play basketball at night instead of doing some other stuff? The mayor needs the money. The mayor needs the money. That means you need to have a governor who's not going to veto that legislation. You need enough individuals, allies, who are going to override that veto. So even overriding the veto is a display of power. And so you have to tell young people, follow the work, follow the math. We knew in 2010, when only a few segments of the population turned out, that we had a generation to deal with this, because then they control the districts. Then those districts send particular legislators here, and those legislators empower states to do things or not do things. So some attorney generals say, well, I'm not going to follow the law. All right? Or some attorney generals say, you know what, I'm not gonna get into Obamacare. Those decisions happen the moment you vote. It's a rippling effect. So what I tell people, if you want to actually get young people involved and you want to get them excited, show me the work. Let me show you the work. You worried about what's going on in your police office or your police district? Then let's talk about the mayor. Let's talk about the city council. Let's talk about the governor. Let's talk about the General Assembly. Before you even get to the top of the ticket, the whole state matters. There is residential segregation. You want to get rid of homeless people, right? You want to put them in homes? Well, how much money does the budget get in order to get equal housing? Those are things that young people can understand. They play basketball, they listen to music, they can understand it. You just got to draw the things out for them. And unfortunately, sometimes we talk past young people, okay? We talk past young people who think they can't follow it, but they can follow it. They can see constellations in the sky that they can connect the dots. Connect the dots. 2010, 2016, now, November, the first presidential election after the Voting Rights Act was passed, we're not going to have Section 5. But we're going to have people out there who are monitoring and making those calls and telling people, bring 5 people with you, bring 5 people with you. Call your state legislature and say, how can I be a poll watcher? Okay? Talk to your college professors in your high school and say, how can I be a poll watcher? Those are the things that young people can understand. They understand the hustle. Tell them they're being hustled.
Thank you, Dr. Meadows. So we are going to take a few questions, but I have another housekeeping announcement to make for you. But before we do that, I want to point out something Dr. Meadows brought up, Senator Pugh brought up, and Kristen, actually everybody tied all of this in. There are collateral consequences for so many of the issues that we deal with. You heard the senator talk about how there are people who, because they've gone through the criminal justice system, may now have a hard time getting housing or student loans. When Kristen said you have to vote down ballot because so many issues that impact our lives are impacted by the choices we make in the voting booth, that is so true. So you all remember, we are not just in November electing a president. We are electing people who will keep our lives, our homes, our children, our schools, our access to justice in order. Okay? So as you are telling these stories, as you are in your communities, make sure that that is the framing that you have for this conversation, okay? Now, before we take a couple questions, I have an announcement. Attorney General Loretta Lynch is coming into this room immediately following this panel. Her panel must start at 1. They have to do a security sweep because she is the Attorney General. So we have to end in 5 minutes, and they want you all to come back, but everybody's gonna have to orderly get out of this room so they can do the sweep, and then you are welcome to come back. So I saw 3 hands, I think. 3 or 4. I'm going to take those very quickly, and what I'm going to ask you to do is to ask your questions. I'm going to ask everybody to ask them, and then ask my panelists to address them again, so we can get in as many as possible and be efficient. So I'm going to go from my left to my right, and then panelists, I'm going to ask you to respond to those so that we can follow the security lead. Okay. I'm going to go my left to right. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. You're over there with the microphone.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If those of you who have questions could just stand in that center aisle,
Okay.
then I'll come right to you.
All right. We're going to start here on the right. Hello, sir.
All right, good morning, good morning. So I want to actually extend on the last point that was made in terms of this concept of the hustle and this concept of doing the math. So we look at the Kerner Commission that was established in 1968 that tracked the progress of black folks economically and socially for 20 years. It found that black folks were poor in 1988 than in 1960. That we had a slightly bigger black middle class, but the masses of black people were poor. And I think a part of the issue is that there's been a focus on electing individual black people as opposed to building capacity on the ground of organizations led by folks over from the community to drive the agenda politically. So I think a lot of times when we talk about young people's reluctance to address the vote, that reluctance is because even before the gutting of Section 5 of the of the Voting Rights Act, which is important, that what has happened is that we haven't really seen the material conditions on the ground improve. So why is it then that what's going to happen differently when we talk about restoring Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act or addressing it? What is it that we should expect differently in terms of the material conditions on the ground as opposed to individual people using the idea of black people voting as a way to get individual black people into office, into the corporate mainstream?
Thank you. And then we're going to go right here to the center aisle. And remember, just
Please
ask
keep
your
it brief,
question.
yes.
And because we want to get everybody in, and then our panelists will address those.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay, my name is Arnold King, and my question is, how does the election program work, number 1? Number 2, how do we turn the test cases? And number 3, what issues are going in other states such as Mississippi and Florida? Because here in Dothan, Alabama, the police been arresting black folks, keeping in jail for drug charges. That need to be looked at as well.
And when you say, sir, how does the election program work, do you mean Ms. Clark's election protection program?
Yes,
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Manolia. I'm a journalist. So as I sit here, I think about giving information out. And there's one thing that I have not seen in all my work is a state-by-state voter guide for down ballot, right? So have you all considered doing this or putting this together or getting some partnerships to make sure that people know state by state how to find their local races? Because we're talking about getting young people involved. A lot of times the information, how we get the information out to them is critical. So That's my question.
All right, thank you. That's all the questions?
I believe
Okay.
that's it.
All right, thank you. All right, panelists, we have the question over here dealing with how we get more folks actually elected and engaging the young people. We have the question about election protection, and we have the question about how we educate folks about the down ballot and how they can actually become educated about who's on the ballot at the different levels.
So very quickly, the Election Protection Program, the nation's leading nonpartisan election monitoring effort, works through the engagement of thousands of lawyers and advocates. We plug some of them into hotline centers in 26 different states around the country. And then we also have boots on the ground at different polling sites where we expect and anticipate problems. I'm going to give you one example that I think perfectly illustrates how this program operates to safeguard access on Election Day. This primary season in North Carolina, we got a call from a 93-year-old black woman. She called to report that she went to her polling site with an expired driver's license and they told her that they could not vote. Our trained folks were able to tell her, go back inside that polling place and tell them that you can vote because we know the law and there is an exception in your state for people over the age of 70. If you're over the age of 70 under their crude scheme, you can vote with an expired driver's license. So we help pull this woman from the brink of disenfranchisement by giving her accurate information about what the law requires in her state. So that's kind of a, in short, how the election protection program operates, and we can use your help.
Thank you, Kristen.
I'd like to briefly discuss the ballot. In the state of Alabama, there is an organization called ADC, Alabama Democratic Conference, and each year they publish a ballot that says, who they are recommending to vote for. Of course, if you're a Democrat, you get that. In old years, in the 60s and 70s, people religiously depended on that as to what they have to vote, how way they should vote. But now, I think we need to continue to do that, but also the education of the voters on those particular individuals, where their positions are, because just because you're a Democrat doesn't mean that everything is good. They're going to vote your way. And so we need to, again, do more education of those voters, to those voters, so that they can understand the different position that the people running for office have on those
Mr.
issues.
Simulton, I'm sorry. I need to interrupt you for 1 second. You all, it's the beauty of Washington. I was told because of the Attorney General we have to stop. But here's the good news. I was just told you do not need to leave the room. So you all have the prime seats. So if you would like to stay, and we encourage you to stay for the Attorney General's discussion, please just sit tight, and they will come.